Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be talking about The Good Doctor. And The Good Doctor is an American hospital drama based on a young surgeon with autism and savant syndrome, and I got asked to watch this by a fellow chronic health sufferer called the Chronic Health Chick. She asked me to give my review as an autistic adult, so I watched season 1 all the way through and thoroughly enjoyed it and thought I'd give my thoughts on it. So in the first episode, which is the pilot episode where you get to meet Dr. Sean Murphy, who is the autistic doctor also with savant syndrome. And one thing I noticed at the very beginning is that he has a fascination with lining up his objects, and the way that he brushes his hair, he has to style it in a certain way. Also, we don't get to know that he's a doctor until when he's at the airport helping a young boy who gets glass into his stomach, and he has to end up doing surgery in the surgery at the airport to take the glass out of the young boy to save his life. So yeah, that's when we notice that he's very observant. He puts the pressure on the right point of the body, because at first there's an adult who already knew how to do first aid who was putting the pressure on the wrong place of the injury, and instead of helping the young boy, he was potentially killing him. So he was able to express, no, you're actually doing this wrong, you're actually killing the young boy rather than helping his life. So, then they took him to the hospital. He's able to get the young boy treated and supported, and then he got himself thrown out because he was trying to be too overprotective and not explain who he was properly, so the security had no issues but to throw him out. And then he tried to get back into the hospital, which ended up getting him thrown out again. But luckily, once later on in the scene, you see the president of the hospital actually come and meet him outside, and he gains entry via that way because the president of the hospital knew him before becoming a doctor at the hospital, because he had helped him and his brother at his family house deal with their pet rabbit that sadly had died due to the young boy's dad throwing the rabbit against the wall. So we get to see at first that he gets a little bit of an abuse from his dad. His dad doesn't understand why he is different, why he acts the way he does, and he doesn't understand that the young boy, his own son, has autism, and that he has a different ability of working and relating to people. So that comes down to lack of understanding and the lack of awareness on autism, and especially savant syndrome. And obviously this is done for dramatic effect. It's done to show people what the spectrum is like for a lot of different people who are on the spectrum of some line. And obviously it's to create a little bit of drama towards the stereotyping of autism and disability. So that's kind of makes me sad. But again, and also the dad also assumed that his son wasn't mentally capable of doing anything. So again, it comes down to the lack of awareness and lack of understanding on his son about being on the spectrum. So then we go to see him from being in that situation, then him and his brother move out of the family home because they can't cope with being at home with their dad due to their dad being abusive and not potentially being very helpful and supportive and loving towards them. And they end up living in a bus for a little bit until they manage to get themselves housed later on in the episode. And then the young boy's brother dies. Sadly, he has an injury and it ends up taking his life. So Dr. Sean ends up being on his own once he loses his brother. And we see this by him having increased empathy, and he decides to not really express how he feels about losing his brother. And then he gets focused into the medical books, because you see him with a medical book on his lap, reading about all different medical procedures and how the body works. And because of his savant ability, he's able to see it in a photographic way. And he's able to see how things work in the human body in a more in-depth, in-detailed way than the normal neurotypical person is able to. So also, when you're talking to someone on the spectrum, like, you notice that he doesn't like being asked questions. So when he works in the hospital with the other neurotypical doctors, you'll see that he doesn't like being asked questions, because he kind of just freezes, and all of a sudden you see him kind of look around at people like this, and all of a sudden he says, I don't like questions. And I can understand that, because being asked questions and you're expected to answer straight away, you're expected to say a certain phrase or a certain tone of how to answer the question. It's to do with sensory processing and mental processing power of the question and how we should best reply to it. So after all, we get to see him in the medical field and on intense focus, and the fact he is able to do things that other people aren't. And yet the medical board, before they hire him, they debate whether he is medically fit to work within the hospital and whether he's able to mentally comply with what's expected of him in the job role. And they all vote against him apart from the president of the hospital, who says if he doesn't perform to expectations, what he knows he's capable of, he will resign his job as president of the hospital. So they allow him to take on the autistic surgeon, which is Dr. Murphy, and they assess him and make sure that he's able to mentally cope with what's demanded of him, what's expected of him. And I think the president of the hospital was right to do that, because it shows again that he was able to cope with the understanding of someone on the spectrum and someone with a highly adaptable brain and highly focused, intense brain because of the savant syndrome, and also that the fact that the autism makes him more highly focused and highly capable of a lot more medical details than the neurotypical doctors are able to express. The doctors don't often see things that he sees, and now they go back to him asking, what did you see? What are you seeing? Tell us what you're seeing. How can we miss things? So he's able to pick up little things that not others are able to see. So I'm glad that they gave him the chance to prove himself, and that it's not a complete arrogance story, but in fact they've actually held their interests and they're able to actually express how Dr. Murphy is part of their team and how they work together. But again, it's the drama fact of they're able to put kind of a judgment on autism, and they're able to kind of tell people, oh, well, this doctor has autism, he has communication issues, how is he going to successfully communicate with people in the real world, and how is he going to communicate with the patients without frightening them? And I think, again, this is the deliberate awareness factor that they're able to express to him, look, you can't say certain things in front of patients because you're going to scare them. And there's a few instances that you'll see if you watch The Good Doctor, which I'll link the DVDs down below in my video description where you can get them from. And I feel that this is a general kind of episode 1 wrap up. I'm going to be reviewing each episode week by week, so keep tuned, and I hope you've enjoyed this episode 1 pilot review, and I'll see you in the next video, guys. Bye!